friends. Welcome to Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum, uh, uh, monthly lecture series. Some of you may be knowing that Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum was launched in September last year by the Mombusho Scholars Association of India. The forum aims to unravel and document the lesser known and under-researched aspects of India-Japan historical and cultural interactions through lectures, seminars, and conferences with support from India International Center, the Japan Foundation, and Indian Council for Cultural Relations. We also bring out publications in collaboration with the Japan Foundation. Since its inception, the forum has held one international conference on discovering India-Japan civilizational ties and Southeast Asia connectivities in February 2023, and 8 monthly lectures. Today we have two very eminent scholars, both of whom are also multifaceted personalities. Today's talk by Professor Archana Shastri is the 9th under Kizuna monthly lecture series. She will speak about textiles and sustainability, a shared culture of thrift. Professor Archana Shastri is a very versatile practicing artist, a designer, and an educator. She has headed the FD and FC departments of NIFT, Art Education Department at NCERT, GCA Chandigarh, Kala Darshana, IGNCA, and was the former director of MGCA, Traditional Textile Museum, Cambodia. To her credit are several exhibitions and published papers. She holds a postgraduate degree in fine arts from MS University, fellowship from NID, advanced printmaking from RCA, London, and fashion orientation from FIT, New York. And we have equally versatile scholar and a design practitioner, Professor Saumya Pande, as the chair. She has been associated with fashion design at Indian Institute of Art and Design, New Delhi. She is very much influenced by her Indian identity rooted in traditional skills. As a textile revivalist and a professor of design, she is currently writing a book on Kheta, lesser documented embroidered quilts of Shersha Badis, and complete her field research on the weaving village of Kutampalli, Kerala. She learns, unlearns, and teaches with seeds, pots, and baskets. Now, I request Professor Saumya Pande to chair this session, say the introductory remark, and invite Professor Archana Shastri to make her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sushila Narsimhan. So just taking Archana's introduction forward, I just wanted to mention that, you know, her last assignment was being the former director of Mekong Ganga Corporation Asian Textile Museum at Cambodia. To her credit, other than what you've mentioned, she has various publications, group and solo shows, design projects. Several of her collection of her work are housed at Al-Qazi in Chester Hurwitz, US Library of Congress, Masanori Fukuoka's collection at Glembra Museum, and Peabody Essex Museum, USA, amongst the others. She's enriched several design schools, museums and galleries, you know, shaped the future of several students, thousands of students, with her insightful lectures and workshops. And as a student of hers, I'm particularly fond of her film, TV, and theater projects, the last one being मैं घोड़े को जलेबी खिलाने ले जा रहा था, for her storyboarding and production design. So that's the versatile Archana Shastri that we have with us today. And so as part of the monthly series, today's lecture is titled as Textile and Sustainability, a shared lecture of thrift. So Archana is elaborating on the shared concern and economy of thrift between India and Japan. So I'll hand it over to Archana for her presentation. And we are hoping to have some question answers at the end of her session. So Archana, maybe you can take over from.
Thank you, Dr. Narsimhan, Dr. Jane, Kizuna, and Professor Saumya Pande for the generous introduction. And it is indeed a privilege to address this prestigious platform. And as stated, my narrative would focus on the shared cultural values and practices between India and with reference to sustainability and textiles, shared culture of thrift. So can I sort of, can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'm sort of referring to that. I was just talking about basically, textiles and clothing are literally, there are spaces that we dwell in. And both textiles and clothing actually, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, yes, Archana, we
Yes,
can hear
we
you.
can. Go ahead.
You can see. Okay. Yeah. So both the textile and clothing together and independently, they frame as well as contain the body. And they confer on it an identity, socio-cultural, gender, power, role, and status within the ingrained and localized principles of modesty and beauty. Clothes activate and extend the self or the being into becoming. Clothes by nature are performative. They aid or dictate our behavior. We are what we wear. Now, the evolution of the socio-cultural identity and projection cannot be isolated from its environment or its ecosystem. The use of traditional natural resources, tools, and technology bear direct testimony to the localized way of life with an ever-expanding worldview. So here you see, you see the straw, bark, cotton dyed in sort of indigo. And on the right-hand side, you see a raincoat from Bastar. So obviously using the kind of natural material available to them.
Archana, that's the previous slide. So if you can go back to the previous slide. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, sort of this stands true for both India and Japan. Let me briefly summarize and illustrate this through a focus on certain values of ethics and aesthetics ingrained in the folk practice of recycled and repurposed textiles in the industrial phase. Before I go down to that, I would just like to show you that here materials are very fascinating because most of these materials are part of their sort of lived-in experience. Here you have paper, which is actually used, spun into a cord and combined with made, which further kind of informs, the other material sort of forms. So when it comes to the textiles, you can see this, this is actually worn as a sweat shield under the armor. On the right-hand side, just to give you a comparative this thing, you see the Nagas, who actually use natural material, and this in turn informs the patterns. Here again, you see them, Mithun being a very sort of a source of, considered as well, finds its appropriate kind of, sort of representation on the Naga road. Now, in Japan, the ecosystem favored the use of natural fibers. They were extracted from wisteria, arrowroot, hemp, ramu, flax, just to name a few. And these were spun and woven into coarse fabrics. Now, they were harsh on the skin, given to friction, and not very absorbent or warm, besides being extremely laborious to produce. Now, cotton, though imported from China in 14th century, was scarce. And it was largely the hand-me-downs, from the aristocrats and the merchants who provided, sort of worn-out cotton to the rural folks. So once cultivated around 1800 AD, the farmers spun and wove their own cotton. Now, the noragi, or the folk clothing as it is called, was thus homemade with the skill sets disseminated from one generation to the next. So given the warmth and softness and breathability of cotton in comparison to the above mentioned natural fibers, the initial worn out scraps of tattered or worn out hand-me-down textiles in rural Japan were constantly renewed, repaired, recycled, and repurposed for a whole variety of utility products, obviously for very practical and economic reasons. Now, these were referred to as the boro, a Japanese term for the use of worn out tatters, which were extensively repaired to last beyond their expectant life cycle. Now, the boro textiles and clothing served as ultimate exemplars when it came to the practice of thrift. Now, technique used was very, very simple. It was very elementary, that of a running stitch, and later elaborated through highly evolved craft of shashiko. On the right, you see the craft of shashiko. And this act of recreating and reinforcing mediated the lived-in and shared experience of the textiles or the garments through the embedded presence, memory, and the emotional bond between the maker, the wearer, and the inheritor. Now, the act or intention was not to beautify, but to allow or continue to be as is. In words of Yoshiko Wada, true beauty lay in the undistinguished realm prior to beauty and ugliness. Now, given the easy availability of indigo in Japan, the utility products were continuously renewed. They were dyed in shades of blue, and thus internalizing the enveloping aura of the blue which emanated from the skies and the ocean. In addition, the dye was believed to have antibacterial properties, medicinal properties that kept away odors and insects and even snakes. So, scarcity combined with ingrained solace and comfort, these repurposed utility textiles nurtured deep appreciation for the transient, that is for things which were passing, and the frugal, thus imbibing a deep sense of humility and gratitude. Their unique aesthetics lay not in the intended attempt to overtly beautify or decorate, but in the humble and grained attitude and aesthetics defined by the principles of the Japanese motai-nai and wabi-sabi. Now, motai-nai stood for humility, gratitude, and respect, whereas wabi-sabi for the state of transience and impermanence. Now, this extended and resonated with the ingrained belief in the Japanese ancient religion Shinto. Now, Shinto attributed every material presence with kami or a deity, and later fused with the philosophy of Zen, which emerged from Buddhist influence via China. Now, Chan Buddhism was the Chinese equivalent of Zen and was derived from the Sanskrit term dhyana. Shared and assimilated was also the Buddhist concept of samsara, the continuous and ceaseless cycle of life, death, and existence. The Buddhists believed in a transient and an impermanent world, thus echoed and found synergies with the practice of mediation between the material and the spiritual, the tangible and the intangible, through the meaningful use of patched Buddhist robes and other ritualistic items, textiles from found or donated fabric. So here you see a Tibetan Buddha wearing patched fabrics. Now, in India, the reference to Buddhist robes actually dates back as early as 2,500 years ago. They were referred to as chivara in Sanskrit and Pali, and kasaya when dyed in saffron. Now, the kasaya was originating in India, was made in three robes, referred to as the three chivara. So you had an antarvasik, which was an inner garment or a waistcloth. You had a uttarasanga to cover the upper part of the body, and then you have the outer robe, which they call the samghati. Now, the robe was propagated as pure cloth, that which was not wanted by anyone, and thus constructed from discarded, polluted, or solid fabrics. Here you see an example of the Japanese kesa, which is silk, but these are largely donated for making merit. Now, the word khati refers to Sanskrit katha, meaning rags, and was originally meant for the outcasts and the ascetics. The folk version of katha is also kheta or kshetra, and refers to the description of the fields of Magadha amongst the Buddhists. The field and furrows were replicated through use of discarded, polluted, or donated scraps of fabric. Just as plantation contributes to the physical nourishment, the robe was equated as being a field of merit, ensuring spiritual nourishment. Not surprisingly, the revisiting and breathing life into the disintegrated and perishable becomes an accepted way of life, inculcating an attitude of humility, frugality, and regeneration. There is also a kind of Chinese reference that the word khati finds its continuity with the Indian terms like Gudari, Gadi, Goidi, Gandoli, and of course the Kanta. Now, these refer to recycled utility textiles of used, discarded old fabrics, a practice that continues till date in the humblest of rural societies across India. So you have Sujani from Bihar, you have Kanta from Bengal, and you can see how the threads have been pulled out from the borders and utilized, utilized for the the red and the black in the motifing. This is yet another Kanta. So, which again, when we're talking about speaking of India, either it is the woman's aspiration, so where she's talking about, her lived aspiration, benedictions, or her kind of finding consonance, with certain mythological or folk stories. So here you have the Chirhara of the Krishna Lord, and this again is from map from Pande. So speaking of India, the ecological diversity with its ancient contact and trade by land and sea since ancient times, there exists a kaleidoscopic abundance of region-specific, localized, and sustainable textile practices. Now, the unique in form and function, material and technique, their visual repertoire echoed the patterns and rhythms of their environment and survival. So, Kheta actually emerges from the word Khe, and their aesthetics are perfected through imagination and based on lived perception of reality. Now, their unique cultural and material identity expanded on the lived and transformed socio-cultural experiences through continued visual narratives that range from the traditional to present day times. Now, these narratives, as I earlier mentioned, uh, may come from kind of personal aspiration, benedictions, or invocations, which at times found corresponding resonances, depicted through mythical and folk legends and epics. As in Japan, so in India, the construction of both textiles and even garments were based on 0% wastage. Whatever we used as drapes, you want to kind of cut it and stitch it to size. They are used as they are, and so much so that the elementary soup or the yarn or rags of fabric in India were offered to deities and trees with an underlying desire for fructification. Once ritualized, the anointed trees were ensured protection and thereby sustenance for the community. Now, shows you the diversity, the ecological diversity, where you find all across India, Bengal, Bihar, Kutch, Rajasthan, both traditional and even in contemporary times. Now, however, both India and Japan were to succumb to modernity that was synonymous and equated with westernization. Industrialization, followed by globalization, has endangered and diffused the plurality and diversity of the living culture. The globalized world we live in today is a fluid one, without borders, with instant access across time and space. It is a world that has been designed and created to meet the aspirations of a homogenized international community that is highly commercial, capitalistic, and consumerist. It has led to depletion of natural resources and contributed to environmental degradation and global warming. The production and consumption of clothing are no longer need-based, but subject to escalating commercial gains through quick-paced turnovers and indisposable waste generation. Today, the textile industry is the second largest pollutant in the world. In terms of manufacturing, it employs the overuse of outsourced manpower that is subject to unsafe working environment and extremely low exploitative labor costs. Now, this has augured since the 70s a formal addressal and concern for sustainable and responsible practices of manufacturing and slow consumption. The embedded skill sets of repair, reuse, and repurpose in practice are currently given to constant creation, reinvention through imagination, and through time and labor-intensive engagement with the handmade and the handcrafted. In view of the AI-generated scenario, humanitarian concerns and sustenance uphold the processes that do not deplete natural resources and saves the planet from the abuse of overuse through means that do not bifurcate the hand from the heart and the craft from the art. So these are both examples from sort of contemporary designers who are using a lot of waste, which is also produced in their sort of studios, and kind of reusing and repurposing them for sort of newer garments. Both India and Japan have a strong presence in ethos that can contribute to the world at large. Thank you.
If we have any questions, maybe they can be shared in the chat. Thank you, Archana, for the presentation. I'm sorry for all the technical glitches that we began with.
I practiced it yesterday, thinking there'll be no glitch, but anyway, yeah.
So I just wanted to ask that in your study of, looking at these repurposed utility, textiles, what is the kind of discrepancy that you see in the Western eye?
Well, in the Western eye, the tendency generally is to look at reality, from a very scientific and a rational view. It's the scientific eye as we look through this or through the camera apparatus. And representation is based on reality. And besides that, the norms of beauty are kind of specified, so they're literally tutored and they keep changing from time to time. Whereas in the Southeast Asian, sort of sensibility, there is no differentiation between, let's say, matter and, sort of mind, or the hand and the heart. It is a process which is kind of united. It is a process where it allows you to be without thinking of the consequences. It kind of doesn't go into this binary sort of thought of segregating things. And that's where the sort of, this holistic kind of approach to making things, is now actually being valued in a big way. Does it answer your question?
Yes, in a way, yeah. I was just interested in knowing, how you are also seeing them in your documentation. So another question that comes to my mind is in terms of these decorative stitches. When we're talking about these utility textiles, how do you see the commonness in both these areas? You've spoken about sashiko, and then we've also looked at the katha, stitches. So is it similar? Is it something that
similar? They may be in terms of stitches, but each one has a very cultural and local identity. So there are lots of crafts, and particularly shashiko, which is related to kind of remending and repurposing, has a very elaborate kind of vocabulary. In contrast, India has so many states, and the vocabulary, and at so many levels, the vocabulary is actually localized. And there is also this whole thing of, coming together at the national front, where each one kind of imbibes from the other, and in the process also gets diffused. But obviously, any of these traditions will evolve, they will develop, and they will be shaped by their own kind of histories and consequences. So this is something which one has to kind of bear in mind. Also, given the kind of information age and mass mechanization of things, the hand produced actually now carries, a lot of sort of weight. It is not just exotic, it is value. So that is the value which one is kind of talking about. Right. Yeah. So we are talking about ethics and we are talking about aesthetics.
Right.
Yeah. There are two sort of people who raise their hand. Yeah.
Yes, I had. May I, chairperson, ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Dr. J. Yeah.
I was interested in knowing about the apprenticeship because if I understand correctly, there's a very rigorous kind of apprenticeship in Japan, almost like Guru Shishya Parampara.
Yes.
Now, was there any difference between the way apprenticeship worked in India in the crafts textiles compared to Japan? I not clear.
Japan actually got completely modernized, and most of the crafts actually kind of really survive at a studio level. Whereas in India, you see, most of the sort of rural, humble, sort of population is still kind of in this mode of making it for yourself. And unfortunately, I mean, this is something which we have again imbibed from the West, that anything which is kind of time intensive, labor intensive, is down the run. So anything which is sort of easily manufactured and you can circulate it around, So there is a difference in terms of, the context and the practice both. Like in India still, a lot of the sort of, local communities continue to practice the craft. And thereby, you see, it is imbibed by the younger generation. So education, I mean, I had a brief this thing at NCRT, and I was very keen that you see the local crafts were imbibed at the school level. So they kind of automatically are in touch with the repository of skills they have been born to. But unfortunately, the education kind of, you see, doesn't really look at the sort of what you call local and indigenous crafts as sort of as related to higher. And similarly, if you look at the sort of the recent design sort of scenario, there are not very many people. I mean, everyone goes in for the Western perception of fashion. And so there is a kind of, one has to kind of re-look at this ethos, establish it, and see what can be done about it.
May I take one more? I mean, I was not clear that in Japan it's kind of a studio situation. What does that mean?
You see, there one is the depleting population. Secondly, you see, it's become an art form, and when it becomes a high art, you see,
okay,
kind of loses the immediacy or the spontaneity of a local craft, And that is what, when they say the borrow, which, I mean, the idea was not to make it beautiful. The idea was to make it sustainable, And so much of sort of emotion was invested in it that by the time they found it, I mean, it was an object of art. It is sort of being shown almost all over the world. So it has gained value in Japan, but to my mind, I mean, Saumya can bear me out, it has still not arrived at the true value of the handcrafted in India.
Thank you. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have another person with raised hand.
Yeah.
Okay. Professor Shastri, thank you so much, first of all, for the presentation. I would like to ask you a question on the grounds of sustainability and future outlook, because like I research on SDGs. So you told me that the textile industry, or let's say artisanal kind of goods, like from the, how do I say, from the expansion of globalizations, capitalism, and exceptional global competition, do you think that these traditional textiles or these handmade textiles can actually be sustainable in the, let's say, in the next decade, or can they be actually industrialized? But if you industrialize something, then can you actually have that exotic level of quality, which you kind of like highlighted?
You see, there are sort of problems within the society also because of this whole mechanized kind of, easily available, consume and throw away, Now, there are these sort of, let's say the social structure has crumbled. So now in United States, actually people are coming together, the women are coming together. It's not only a therapy, you see, it is also a kind of community formation where people share, where people, and artistic activity is very elevated. So that is the dimension which we have, sort of chosen to ignore. You know. So how do we kind of invest in the handcrafted? And handcrafted, I mean, all over the world, now learning is through doing, and you generate knowledge, you innovate on it and come out with something new. Yeah. But what has happened, I mean, in the Indian scene, if you look at whether it is Indian art or whether it is, Indian fashion, and you get lynched for it, but they have become like factories. You employ people, just recently Dior employed, Chanakya school people. And we have to guard against that for the simple reason that, from mechanized production, we cannot reduce the women who are working with their, day in and day out with just one stitch. Where is the creativity? So we cannot, so we have to guard against these things, So this is something which, people have to think about. And we have to kind of, and look at the emotional wealth you generate. When you make it, you say, oh, my mother made it. I carry it with me. And that emotional bonding does not come through these throwaway consumable goods, aaj pehna phir nikala and saste mein de diya. Certain values which one has to sort of.
Thank you so much.
I think Padmani wants to contribute somewhere.
I'm unmuted. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I wanted to tell you, Archana, I mean, when the question, when Ashok, Dr. Jain, Ashok Jain mentioned about this Sashiko and what you have said, I'm sorry, I actually couldn't get connection, so I could join only later. So beginning, I didn't see everything. So I could have missed out something. The thing is that about like I travel quite a bit in Japanese rural sectors as well during my several research projects, and I could see a lot of crafts which are not just studio crafts, and they have this kind of workshops like what we have in India. If especially if you go to Okinawa, even in Sashiko, I've seen some of those. So maybe they are hidden in some smaller parts of Japan. Maybe some of these larger cities do not have them so much. But even way back in 1995, I could see a lot of such craft workshops.
No, your
in,
experience is highly valuable because you've traveled there. I'm only talking through what I have read. You see?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is very, very important because if there are sort of, but this kind of going into sustainable practices, is something which was looked at, very, very disdainfully in, Japan at one time.
Yeah.
But now it has gained in currency.
Now there is, especially when you go to cities like Kyoto, Tokyo, and when you go to the galleries, then of course it is all full of arts. And even I've seen in recently in 2019, like I've gone to some of these exhibitions which were done by Kyoto Sete University, and then there were some other universities, and also the artists. There are like artist guilds, and they are putting it up. So textile artist guilds putting up things. They are more art oriented, as you said very clearly. And they're using traditional technique, adding some another technique, sometimes mixing them and then showing that. And that is very, very, they're like textile artists rather than just the craftspeople or the like what we have also in India and a whole lot of. But there are other workshops which are still going on, which are from these kind of things in Japan, and they have kept their traditions alive.
Yeah.
That way. Actually, it has increased some places,
Kind of, yes, revival, a very strong revival. In fact, reading somewhere, and they
Hmm.
talk about sort of sustaining these values. And
Yeah.
it is something which is very, I would say, sort of, you know, up in the universe at the moment,
Yeah.
you know.
But
So,
also, I think the reason, one more reason was that after the World War, many crafts had died
yes.
because of bombarding. Especially, I'm talking about Okinawa, where lots of bombs had fallen and it was completely destroyed. And I have gone to this workshop where this Taira-san has revived entire banana craft industry. Banana is bashofu, they call it. And banana fibers making and all, entire thing is revived very well. And
Very well.
you won't believe it, even at 99 years age,
Yeah.
this lady who revived it was standing upright and still spinning the yarn from banana fiber. When I
No,
went last time in
I have a lot of
2019.
Japanese designers coming to India. And
Hmm.
again, I've spoken to some of them and I've sort of read about them. And they
Hmm.
talk very clearly that when they say these principles of what they call the motonai
Hmm.
and the wabi-sabi, like
Hmm.
it's something in the factory-like situation not really valued in the Indian sense, which is true because it is so ingrained, you know, in their ethics and aesthetics. We are not given to actually valuing it as much as we should,
Hmm.
you know. So that is
Yeah.
something which, I mean, one has to kind of systematically work towards.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Very nice presentation. And I would like to see it again. Do you have that available in online or something that we can see? Because I could not get through the
I
connection in the beginning.
send it to you.
Yes, the
Yeah,
entire
okay.
thing would be on available to YouTube. We have recorded it, and it
Yeah,
will be
okay.
sort of put on the net within a day. You will be able
Okay,
to
that
see
would
it.
be lovely. Yeah, that would be wonderful. Okay, thanks, Archana.
Archana, I also have, I had one more question. Looking at um, revival and involvement of, younger generation of designers. In India, it's so much, all of these repurposed textiles have such direct interaction with communities. How do you see that sort of, coming together in terms of how do we balance out that cultural identity with the involvement of, designers and
See, with specific reference to the designers, you see their input in socio-cultural aspect. In the social sciences is very, very minimal. Yeah. And really speaking, their skills also, you know. So they are basically desktop designers. That's what I you see. So unless you know the craft, unless you do the craft yourself, unless you understand the sort of context of the craft, I mean, any craft, traditional craft just doesn't kind of emerge in sort of just for the sake of it. Yeah. So it is rooted in the kind of value they give to it. So unless you understand that and you can map, you know, I mean, this is something which I love doing, you know, okay, you look at the natural kind of this thing and how, what kind of techniques evolve from there and how, you know, these techniques become part and parcel. I mean, something even like the Geek tribe, you see, you know, they have done their tattoos on their face. And the second step was when they made fabric, those tattoos became an internal part of the textile. Yeah. So these kind of the mapping, if you do, you will see, you can go to the source and you can see how it has evolved, you know. But this evolution has to be kind of understood and be taught to the, you know, students.
to be part of the education. Yeah. Thank you. So if we don't have any more questions, maybe Professor Sushila, do we close the session?
I think Padmini has raised her hand. Maybe she wants to ask one more question, but this would be the last question. Then we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I already spoke.
Okay.
So I already talked.
Okay, all right. So I would like to.
I have a, sorry, can I have a request?
Yeah.
I think it's a very rich presentation, and it would be great, Archana, if you could give us the write-up also, because I think much of this needs to be read carefully.
Yeah.
So, as an exception, if you could also give us the write-up,
I'll
that
send
would
it
be
across.
great.
I'll send it across. It's not
Yes.
very kind of, I would say, not in-depth in that sense. But I mean, these are actually notes for me. I worked a lot on the Buddhist rituals in Cambodia.
Yes.
And at some point, it would be very interesting to look at the ritualistic context, you know, in which textiles are used.
Uh-huh.
And that is something which is, because unless we know the context, we will never value it. You know. And how you emote through textiles is yet another area which is very fascinating. I was talking to Saumya and I was telling her that traditionally when they initiated the Buddhist, you know, the twice born, he was actually sort of, you know, kept in a hut, dark, and anointed with yellow to kind of recreate the womb-like situation. And then when he was delivered, he was wrapped up into the kora fabric, which actually emulates the placenta from which, you know, the newborn is delivered. And thereafter, he kind of becomes a Buddhist as a twice born. Now, it's absolutely fascinating because we find such examples, you know, all over India. And but then they're being lost, they're not being sort of read or written or talked about. And that is where I feel, you know, the faculty has a big role to kind of play there, because unless they themselves look at it, otherwise you're just kind of looking at the surface, you're looking at the textile, and that's it. I can't hear you, Saumya.
I think you also explained the sari very beautifully and the pleats that go around. So maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the male dhoti, you see, you tie a knot at the navel, you know, and it is the center of your being. So it connects, you know, and during the Shraddh ceremony, you know, when they let loose the sort of flow of the pleats, you know, in the memory of the dead, you know, again, it is kind of evoking the umbilical cord. So there are many references which you will find, whether it is with specific reference to a motif or a particular kind of gesture or a particular kind of a textile in a specific context. And these are stories which would be very interesting to, you know, kind of narrate.
So thank you, Archana, for this insightful presentation. So I also want to thank Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum for organizing this and making it into a monthly, you know, series. And Professor Sushila, Dr. Ashok Jain, and also the advisory board members. So, Professor Sushila, would you like to just wrap up?
Yes, on behalf of Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum, I express my heartfelt thanks to Professor Archana Shastri for a very fascinating presentation and the lively discussion that followed. And thank you, Saumya, for chairing this session. I also thank the listeners for joining us on this Zoom platform. Our next lecture with documentary is by Professor Binoy K. Behel, a very eminent art historian, filmmaker, and an avid photographer. This is scheduled for Saturday, 23rd September at the same time, 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And the topic is Hindu deities and Sanskrit in Japan. So please try to join us on 23rd September. Thank you so much once again. Thank you. Thank you very much.